Good evening and welcome to our Bible study today. We're at Proverbs 20, and I'll go ahead and read the Proverbs and then we will go ahead and look at this. Wine is a mocker and beer is a brawler. Whoever is led astray by them is not wise. A king's wrath is like the roar of a lion. He who angers him forfeit his life. It is to a man's honor to avoid strife, but every fool is quick to quarrel. A sluggard does not plow in season, so at harvest time he looks but finds nothing. The purposes of a man's heart are deep water, but a man of understanding draws them out. Many a man claims to have unfailing love, but a faithful man who can find? The righteous man leads a blameless life. Blessed are his children after him. When a king sits on his throne to judge, he willows out all evil with his eyes. Who can say, I have kept my heart pure, I am clean and without sin? Differing weights and differing measures, the Lord detests them both. Even a child is known by his action and whether his conduct is pure and right. Ears that hear and eyes that see, the Lord has made them both. Do not love sleep, or you will grow poor. Stay awake, and you will find food to spare. It is no good, says the buyer. Then off he goes and boasts about his purchase. Gold there is, and rubies in abundance, but lips that speak knowledge are a rare jewel. Take the garment of one who puts up security for a stranger. Hold it in pledge, if he does it for a wayward woman. Food gained by fraud tastes sweet to a man, but he ends up with a mouthful of gravel. Make plans by seeking advice. If you wage war, obtain guidance. A gossip betrays a confidence, so avoid a man who talks too much. If a man curses his father or mother, his lamp will be snuffed out in pitch darkness. An inheritance quickly gained at the beginning will not be blessed at the end. Do not say, I will pay you back for this wrong. Wait for the Lord, and he will deliver you. The Lord detests differing weights, and dishonest scales do not please him. A man's steps are directed by the Lord. How can anyone understand his own way? It is a trap for a man to dedicate something rashly, and only later to consider his vows. A wise king willows out the wicked. He drives the threshing wheel over them. The lamp of the Lord searches the spirit of a man. It searches out his innermost being. Love and faithfulness keep a king safe. Through love his throne is made secure. The glory of a young man is their strength. Gray hair, the splendor of the old. Blows and wound cleanse away evil, and beating purge the innermost being. As with most proverbs, we see several themes, and I want to pick up on a couple of them. We see twice verse 10, and then later on, verse 23. It basically reads pretty much the same. Verse 23 reads, the Lord detests differing weights, and dishonest scales do not please him. Verse 10 says, differing weights and differing measure, the Lord detests them both. And what that is basically saying is God loves people who deal honestly. People who deal honestly. In other words, if you sell something that is valued at a certain price, sell it for that price and don't do dishonest things to get gain. And we see that again in verse 14 from a different perspective. Verse 14 reads, it's no good, says the buyer. Then he goes off and boasts about his purchase. And that's the flip side of the other one. The dishonest scales talk about someone who is selling something and they are dishonest and take advantage of the buyer. Verse 14 is talking about a buyer who tries to say the item is no good and tries to get it for a cheaper price than what its value is. And here's the thing, as Christians, we need to make sure that we are always dealing with people. I mentioned about 15 weeks ago, as Christians, we always do the right thing in the right way for the right reason, that we always do the right thing. And that's the idea about dishonesty, both as a seller or a buyer. And the reality, depending on the situation, we should always, not sometimes, but we should always deal honestly with people. The second thing that we see in this Proverbs, and I want to get back, is one that we haven't seen before. And it picks up in the first verse, and there's only one verse about it. Wine is a mocker, and bear a brawler. Whosoever is led astray by them is not wise. And the issue is drinking alcohol. In the Bible, we see Jesus performed a miracle. His very first miracle was transform water into wine. And I want for everybody to be quite clear, I am not saying that drinking in and of itself is evil, because Jesus himself partook of wine. Or communion service, depending on the church, the Catholic Church still use wine. The Baptists and the Methodists, depending on the Baptists and the Methodists, may or may not use wine. But this Proverbs is talking about alcoholism, where a person cannot control their drinking. And what it is saying is wine is a mocker and beer is a brawler. That a person who cannot control their liquor, they start drinking and they drink, and the more they drink, the more they say things that are not exactly important or wise, and they just say things for saying things' sake, and that's what wine does. And beer is a brawler, and how many times we have seen people get in fights because they were drinking, and how many times have we seen people do stupid things because they were under the influence of alcohol? And we have to think about this. Under the influence of alcohol now has become a thing where people, for example, and legally, people who are under the influence and are caught driving their vehicle are fined. But even back then, when they didn't have cars that we had to have a full faculty to drive, etc., the Bible makes it quite clear: whosoever is led astray by over drinking. And here's the thing. As I mentioned, I'm not against drinking. I don't want y'all to say, if you drink, the church is against you, or specifically I as the pastor is against you. But what I'm saying is drinking to excess, where you are under the influence of alcohol and you no longer have control of your faculties, then you are led astray, and it is not wise to do that. And here's the thing about alcoholism. I know as a society and as a church, we try to help people, be it AA, the 12 steps, Anon, you name the different things. And it's not just wine and beer, but alcohol in general, where it is taken to excess. And I have known people who were alcoholics that were co-workers of mine. After all, if you remember, I spent 26 years in the federal prison, and some of my co-workers would come to work, they would do their job, but then they went home and they would drink, and some of them would come to work under the influence. And the reality is, working in a prison environment under the influence of alcohol is not a good idea. Working in a factory where you can be hurt under the influence is not a good idea. As we know, driving a car under the influence is a terrible idea. It causes a lot of accident, people are killed, etc. But here's the thing. Doing things under the influence. I'm not saying never drink, but my advice, and this is just for y'all to understand, my advice is, if your family have a history of alcoholism, the best thing you can do is don't drink at all. If you can't control how much you drink, don't drink. Go into a program. And You know, but there is nothing wrong if you take a cup of wine with your meal, if you drink, as long as it's in moderation and it is under your control. Unfortunately, there are too many people who wine and beer or alcohol takes over their lives and destroy them, their family, and their loved ones. Today, we could probably add drugs to this. And, people take drugs and it takes over their lives. And I don't want to spend all our time here, but if anybody is ever fall to that, the best thing to do is get treatment. And I've known, like I said, lots of co-workers, including ministers. So I'm not exempting myself from this. I have known ministers, or my profession from this. I've known ministers, including Catholic priests, who could not drink alcohol or the wine for the communion, and they had to take a thing called monstrum, which is a non-alcoholic type wine, in order to perform the ritual for communion or the sacraments. And so my advice from the Bible and from me, and this is advice, don't submit to wine and alcohol or drugs or anything where it controls your life, because you either control it or it controls you. And unfortunately, whenever you play with things like that or I can drink and I'm in control, sooner or later, there are people who find out that they really are not. The next idea that we want to talk about is about man himself. Picking up at verse 3, it is to a man's honor to avoid strife, but every fool is quick to quarrel. And continuing that idea about alcohol or drugs or anything else, the best thing is to avoid problems in the first place. I want to repeat that. The best thing is to avoid problems in the first place. So if you know you would have a problem because of family history about alcoholism or drug addict or whatever, the best thing to do is avoid. So it is to a man's honor to avoid problems, strife. It's to all of our benefit to avoid problems. But here's the thing. People who are fools, they don't avoid strife, they don't avoid problem, and they end up in problems, in quarrels, and problems upon problems. And so for me, my advice to all of you, the best thing to do is to avoid problems in the first place, be it alcoholism or any other problem. Because let's be realistic, there are so many ways we are tempted. Verse 5 reads, the purpose of a man's heart are deep waters, but a man of understanding draws them out. Reality is all of us have dreams, all of us have ideas that we want to pursue, but if you lack understanding, it is worthless. Verse 6 reads, many a man claims to have unfailing love, but a faithful man who can find? And let's talk about this idea, because a lot of people, and this idea is about marriage, a lot of people say, oh, I love you, my love is forever, etc. But how many people we know, especially because going back to the idea of drugs and alcohol and stuff, two people, they're in love, they get married, but because of problems in life, they end up separating. And one of the big problems that I see, and I told my daughters this, that there are 5 things that can derail you in life. And this was when they were going off to college. The first thing is sex. You get involved, you get sex, you get pregnant, that could derail your life. And, I'm not trying to give a sex education here, but make sure you find the right person that's in love with you and will be with you your entire life. The second thing is if you drink drugs and alcohol. So second and third, drugs and alcohol. The fourth thing that can derail you are friends that influence you. But the most important thing that can derail you is you yourself, your personal choices. And so in giving this advice to my daughters and now to all of y'all is make sure that we don't get derailed in life by drugs, alcohol, sex, or friends, because as I mentioned before, influence. Your friends can influence you for good or for bad. And unfortunately, a lot of times, we aren't aware how much our friends influence us. And as I remind you, all influence is powerful and subtle. It's powerful because we don't even realize that we are being influenced by others. As a matter of fact, each and every day we are being influenced by the media, by commercials, especially during this time of the year with the election. Both sides have a lot of commercials out, and all it is, it's trying to influence us to vote for them. And the reality is, it's very subtle and it's very powerful. They pick on an issue and try to get you. So watch out for those things. Verse 7 reads, "The righteous man leads a blameless life. Blessed are his children after him." But this whole idea of a blameless life, as Christians, we are supposed to strive to live Christ-like lives, to be like Christ. But listen to verse 9. "Who can say, I have kept my heart pure, I am clean and without sin?" The psalm does not answer this, but the reality is none of us can say that we are pure and innocent and are without sin. As a matter of fact, the first thing we need to realize is when we became Christians, we admitted that we are sinners and we could not save ourselves, and we threw ourselves on God's mercy and forgiveness and love. And God is the one who cleansed us. We are sinless not because we did not commit sin. We are sinless because God, in his love and grace, has forgiven us. With that said, I want to read verse 11. It says, "Even a child is known by his action, by whether his conduct is pure and right." And Solomon is purported to write Proverbs, and he's pointing out that even kids know right from wrong. And the reality is they are known by actions. And we have heard the saying, actions speak louder than words. Actions speak louder than words. What we do and what we say does influence our lives. And the proverb is saying, even a child is known. So as little kids, they are known. As a matter of fact, St. Augustine said, "Give me a child, and if I train him for 9 years, I will have him for the rest of my life." For the rest of his life, sorry. And here's the thing. Kids, what they do and what they say when they're little, when they're forming their worldview and their lifestyle, those are some very important, vital years. They learn their speech, they learn their thinking pattern, they learn so much. And whatever they learn during those formative years influence them for the rest of their lives. And so one of the things I want for us to ponder is, especially most of y'all that are listening to this have grandkids. Y'all have already raised your kids, and I have already raised my kids. But recognize that what kids do and say when they are kids, and you look at their lives later on, that is more or less who they turn out to be. And we have so much influence on our kids. We have more influence than we realize as parents and as grandparents. And so I want to make a plug here for us, is that we truly need to influence our kids, because the world is trying to influence them. TV, school, all these different things are influencing them. And as I mentioned, influence is subtle and powerful. The big thing that is missing in influence for kids today is a strong Christian values that comes when they are in church. And today, a lot of kids, for example, have not received good, proper religious education. And the person to blame is the church. We, the church, we have lost out to the school system where sports are more important. Other activities are more important. Um, and we don't have very good, strong Sunday school classes where we are teaching our kids. And you know, it's during those formative years that makes a huge difference. And the kids are known by their action. And I want to say that I learn more as a parent from my kids than my kids learn from me. As a matter of fact, kids, when they're little, some of the things that I noticed my daughters did when they were little turned out to determine their personality even now. I think of my oldest daughter who was always cautious and, in many ways, that's the kind of person she is. On the other hand, the younger daughter, even in the womb, I'll tell this story. In the womb, when my oldest daughter was, I would poke her and she would scoot across in the womb to the other side. I'd poke the other side and she'd scoot across. And today, that's the kind of person she is. The younger daughter, on the other hand, you poked her and she would poke back. They have different personalities, and their personalities determine their action. And so the psalm is saying even a child is known by their action and whether their conduct is pure or right. Thank God both my daughters are good, wonderful young women. But here's the thing. Sometimes we see kids who are misbehaving and throwing tantrums and their parents aren't disciplining them, and we think, nothing about it. The reality is what the kid is doing at a young age determines what they're going to do even as a teenager and as an adult. And if y'all stop and think about it, y'all probably have known people over the years that are, depending on how old you are, and if you stop and think about how they were when they were kids, how they were when they were young adults or teenagers and young adults, and how they are as adults, and you can see that there's a direct correlation to their behavior as kids, to teenagers, to, for example, there are kids that I knew that were always getting in trouble, and they get in trouble as young adults, they get in trouble as older adults, and that's just the reality. I think I've spent enough time on that, for we're just at verse 11. Ears that hear and eyes that see, the Lord has made them both. The whole idea here is that ultimately God is in charge. God has made our eyes or ears, etc. And so let's read the other verse that goes with that, verse 24. A man's steps are directed by the Lord. How can anyone understand his own way? Reality, and we have talked about this theme before, God is in control. God created everything, our eyes, our ears, our mouths, our lips, and we can make all the plans we want. But ultimately, God is the one that is in charge. And when we think that we're in charge of our lives, how can anyone understand his own way? The reality is we don't have that big worldwide view, bird's eye view to see our entire life. And I what I'm talking about is I think back just 2 years ago. My plans were so different than where I am today. 5 years ago, my plans were so different than I was 2 years before that. And as I looked at all the plans that I've made and all the different decisions I've made, I realized that man's steps are directed by the Lord, and that none of us really have understand all of our own ways. And personally, I am glad that God is in charge, because if I was in charge, I would have messed things up a long time ago, including my life, my wife's life, my kids' life, and the church life and such. And so I'm glad that God is in charge and that God leads the way. Couple more things that makes it says about plans. It says, make plans by seeking advice. If you wage war, obtain guidance. Verse 18. I'm not saying that we should not make plans, that we should not seek advice, and we make the best plans we can. And I know I have, 2 years ago, I thought the best plan was what I was deciding. 5 years ago, I thought that was the best plan. And as things change, I realized God change us. Verse 25, it is a trap for a man to dedicate something rashly and only later to consider his vows. I want to talk about this because I know a couple times in my life I made some hasty decision and made commitments that was rash, and later on I ended up regretting what I had committed myself to. And this psalm make it quite clear that it is a trap for a man to decide and to dedicate and to commit to something rashly. And so, like I said, in the past, I made some very rash, my wife would say stupid decisions, and I ended up paying the consequences for it. And only later, after much consideration and debate, I realized that I made the wrong decision. And so my advice to us today, and to myself and to you and to everybody else, is whenever you make a decision, seek good advice, seek good advisors. Don't make a quick decision, especially a life-changing decision, without counsel and guidance from people. And most importantly, make sure you take it to God and to try to get God's input. And sometimes, don't make commitments like that. As a matter of fact, I want to go back up to a verse that, on the other hand, might not seem related, but I really think it is. Verse 16, it says, take the garment of one who puts up security for a stranger. Hold it in pledge if he does it for a wayward woman. And that verse talks about taking the garment. So if somebody was going to put up security for somebody else, you would hold security. It's like the bank. Whenever you take out a loan, they take the house as security for the mortgage, or a car loan or anything. You have to fill out all these things. You are pledging these things. If you default on the loan, they would take your house or take your car, or you owe them so much money. And I remember, I made, like I said, and for those of y'all who haven't seen the previous videos, I made pledge and helped a brother and pledged 5,000, and he was supposed to pay it back. I never saw it. I did not learn my lesson. I pledged again 10,000 to another brother, a security, and gave it to him, and he started paying back. I ended up paying almost the full 10,000. He paid like a month or two, a few $100s. I've made dumb decisions, and what this verse is saying is, don't make dumb decisions. Don't dedicate yourselves too early, and take that pledge. I use my family as an example. I could go on and point out other dumb things I've done with other people, not family members. But it is a trap for a man to dedicate, to make decisions rashly, and then only later consider the consequences. Tonight we're going to end on verse 29. The glory of a young man is his strength. Gray hair is the splendor of old age. What that is saying, in young times, when you're young, physically fit and stuff, you rely upon your physical ability. But old age is the splendor of old age. But gray hair. And I'm glad to say, as I look, the gray has come in, and I can honestly say that instead of making rash decisions and regret later, wisdom have taught me to take a second look, to take certain things as pledge, not to make rash decisions, and that it is indeed splendor of old age. And that's what wisdom is all about. I wish I had learned better and not made rash decisions in the past, but none of us can say we never made a mistake. And so, as sinners who have made mistakes, the question is, are we learning? Are we learning? Have we gotten better? And are we learning? We'll pick up again next week in Proverbs. See you next week.